My name is Audrey, and I'm 32. I stood in that packed boardroom, my heart pounding like it wanted to break free. The CEO, Richard, leaned back with a smirk and said, "Congratulations, you're terminated." Gasps filled the room. Every eye burned into me, but I held my worn notebook tight, my secret weapon. Years of loyalty erased in a second. Betrayal stings, doesn't it? I walked out, but not before hinting at chaos coming their way. Want to know how I fought back? Where are you watching from? Hit, like if you felt this sting, and subscribe to see their regret unfold. I slumped onto my couch, the quiet of my apartment swallowing me whole. My hands trembled as I flipped open my notebook, its pages crammed with code snippets and project notes, each one a piece of my life poured into that company. The boardroom scene replayed in my head, Richard's smug grin, the gasps, my own steady voice masking the storm inside. I was Audrey, 32, the woman who'd built their flagship product from scratch, now discarded like a used tissue. My phone buzzed. Clara's name lit up the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Audrey, you okay?" Her voice was soft, cautious, like she was tiptoeing around broken glass. I laughed bitter. "Okay, I got humiliated in front of 50 people. You tell me." She sighed. I heard. "I'm so sorry. It's not what you think. Can we talk?" "Not on the phone?" My stomach twisted. Clara worked in HR. If anyone knew the truth behind my firing, it was her. I glanced at the clock. 7 p.m. My apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in with every second I sat still. "Fine," I said. "Meet me at the diner on 4th and 20. I grabbed my jacket, the notebook still in my hand. It was my lifeline, proof of every late night, every breakthrough. I'd nicknamed it my insurance policy years ago, half joking. Now it felt like the only thing keeping me grounded. The diner was a short walk, but the cool evening air did nothing to calm the questions swirling in my mind. Why me? I'd never missed a deadline, never failed a review. My code powered their entire platform, the one they bragged about to investors. So why inside the diner, the smell of coffee and fried onions hit me? Clara was already there, tucked into a corner booth, her blonde hair pulled back tight. She looked nervous, her fingers drumming on the table. I slid in across from her, setting the notebook down like a shield. "Spill it," I said, my voice low. "What's going on?" She leaned forward, glancing around. "Richard planned this for weeks. It wasn't random. He's been telling the board it's budget cuts, but that's a lie." My chest tightened. "Weeks, Clara. I was in meetings with him last Friday." He smiled, shook my hand, said I was indispensable. She winced. "I know. I saw emails. He needed a scapegoat. The product's been glitchy and investors are asking questions. He's blaming you to cover his own mistakes." I stared at her, the words sinking in like stones. A scapegoat. All those late nights, the weekends I'd sacrificed, the times I'd skipped dinners with friends to fix bugs nobody else could, it meant nothing. Richard had been plotting, smiling to my face while sharpening the knife. My coffee arrived, but I didn't touch it. My hands were too busy clenching into fists. "What kind of mistakes?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay even. Clara hesitated, her eyes darting away. "Financial ones. He overspent on marketing, ignored the tech budget. The board doesn't know yet, but he's desperate to keep it quiet. Firing you was his way of shifting the blame." I leaned back, my mind racing. Richard's face flashed in my memory. Not the smirk from today, but the way he dodged my questions about resource cuts last month. I'd thought he was just stressed. Now it made sense. He'd been setting me up, letting me carry the weight of his failures. The betrayal burned hot and sharp, but something else stirred too, a spark of anger, small but growing. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Before today, did you know?" Clara's face paled. "Not the full plan. I saw bits, emails here and there. I thought he'd just demote you, maybe. I didn't think he'd do this." I searched her eyes, looking for a lie. Clara and I had been friends since college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and shared dreams of making it big. She'd gotten me the job at the company, vouched for me. but now her hesitation felt like a crack in that trust. She'd known something and said nothing. The diner's hum faded, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Audrey. "I'm sorry," she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled back, not ready for her touch. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said. "I need more than apologies." "What else do you know?" She swallowed hard. "There's an email I didn't tell you about. Richard sent it to the board this morning after you left. He called you unreliable. Said your code was the problem, not his decisions. They believed him. Unreliable." The word hit like a slap. I'd spent years proving myself, teaching myself to code when nobody thought I could, clawing my way up in a field that didn't always welcome women like me. And now Richard was rewriting my story, painting me as the failure. I opened my notebook, staring at the lines of code I'd written, the ones that kept their product alive. My fingers traced a particular sequence, one I'd buried deep in the system years ago. A failsafe. My insurance policy wasn't just a nickname, it was real. "Clara." I said, my voice steady now. "I need those emails. All of them." She nodded, but her eyes were wide, like she sensed something shifting in me. "I'll try. But Audrey, be careful. Richard's not someone you mess with." I didn't answer. The spark of anger was a flame now licking at the edges of my fear. I didn't know what I'd do with those emails, not yet. But sitting there with my notebook in hand, and Clara's words ringing in my ears, I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let Richard erase me. Not without a fight. I left the diner, my steps heavy on the cracked sidewalk. Clara's promise to get the emails echoed in my mind, but her hesitation lingered like a bad taste. The night air was sharp, cutting through my thin jacket, and I hugged my notebook closer, its weight a reminder of what I'd built and what I'd lost. My apartment was only a few blocks away, but I didn't want to go back yet. The thought of facing those cluttered files, each one tied to a company that betrayed me, made my stomach churn. Instead, I turned toward the park, its empty benches lit by flickering streetlights. I sat down, the cold wood biting through my jeans. My breath fogged in the air as I opened the notebook again, flipping to a page I hadn't touched in years. It was a sketch from my first week at the company, a flowchart Helen had drawn during one of our late-night sessions. She'd been my mentor, the one who saw potential in me when I was just a nervous 25-year-old with no degree, only grit. Her looping handwriting spelled out the product's core architecture, but it was her note in the margin that stopped me. "Trust your work, Audrey. It's your power." I traced the words, my throat tightening. Helen had died 2 years ago, but her voice still guided me. She'd warned me about people like Richard, about how ambition could twist loyalty into a weapon. My phone vibrated, snapping me back. A text from Clara. "Found something. Meet me tomorrow, 8 a.m., my place. Be discreet." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Discreet. The word felt like a warning, like Clara was already regretting her choice to help. I typed a quick, "Okay," and shoved the phone in my pocket. The park was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic, but my mind was loud, churning with questions. What had Clara found? And why was she so scared? I stood pacing the path, my boots crunching on stray leaves. The anger from the diner hadn't faded, it was growing, curling tighter around my chest. Richard's lie about me being unreliable wasn't just a personal attack. It was a theft of everything I'd built. I thought of the product, its sleek interface, its millions of users. I'd spent years perfecting it, debugging lines of code while Richard took credit in glossy presentations. And now he was rewriting my story, turning me into the problem. The unfairness of it burned, but what hurt more was Clara's silence. She'd known something was coming and hadn't warned me. Was she protecting herself, or was there more she wasn't saying? I stopped, leaning against a tree, my breath shallow. The notebook felt heavier now, its pages holding not just code, but memories of who I used to be, hopeful, trusting, the kind of person who believed hard work would always win. That Audrey was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I flipped to another page, one I'd marked with a single word: failsafe. It was my secret, a backdoor I'd coded into the system during a paranoid moment years ago. Helen had laughed when I told her, calling it my just in case. Now it was my only leverage, a way to make Richard pay. But using it meant crossing a line I couldn't uncross. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from my sister Rachel. Heard what happened. You okay? I stared at the words, my jaw tightening. Rachel worked in the company's finance department close to the board. If anyone knew about Richard's plans, she would. But her text felt hollow, like an afterthought. I typed back, "Call me," and waited, my fingers tapping against the notebook. Minutes passed. No call. No reply. The silence was an answer, and it cut deeper than I expected. Rachel and I weren't as close as we used to be, not since she started climbing the corporate ladder, but I'd thought she'd have my back. Now I wasn't sure. I started walking again, the park's shadows stretching long across the grass. My mind drifted to a memory of Helen, her silver hair catching the light as she leaned over my desk, pointing out a bug in my code. "Mistakes don't define you," she'd said. "How you fix them does." I wanted to fix this, to take back what Richard had stolen, but the how was murky. The failsafe was a weapon, but it wasn't enough on its own. I needed proof, something to show the world who Richard really was. Clara's emails were my best shot, but her fear made me uneasy. What if she backed out? What if I was alone in this? By the time I reached my apartment, my legs ached and my anger had hardened into something else, resolve. I dropped the notebook on my kitchen counter next to a framed photo of me and Helen at a company retreat. Her smile was warm, steady, like she knew I'd face days like this. I touched the frame, whispering, "I won't let him win." Tomorrow I'd meet Clara. Tomorrow I'd start fighting back. But tonight, all I could do was sit with the weight of betrayal, knowing it was only the beginning. I woke up to the buzz of my alarm, my eyes gritty from a sleepless night. Clara's text about meeting at 8 had kept me tossing her warning to be discreet looping in my head. I was Audrey, 32, and the weight of yesterday's betrayal, Richard's lies. Rachel's silence sat heavy in my chest. I pulled on a sweater, grabbed my notebook, and headed to Clara's apartment, the morning air sharp against my skin. My resolve from the park felt fragile now, like a thread ready to snap. Clara's place was a small walk-up cluttered with books and half-dead plants. She opened the door, her face pale, and handed me a USB drive without a word. "This is it," she said finally, her voice low. "Richard's emails." "But Audrey, you can't tell anyone I gave you this." I nodded, slipping the drive into my pocket. "What's in them?" She gestured to her laptop on the kitchen table. "See for yourself." "But it's bad." I sat down, my heart thudding as I plugged in the drive. The screen filled with email threads, Richard's name in bold. I clicked the first one, dated 3 weeks ago, sent to the board. "Audrey's work is slipping," it read. "We need fresh talent to stabilize the product." My breath caught. Slipping, I'd fixed their crashes, streamlined their updates, all while Richard ignored my requests for more resources. The next email was worse, sent to his nephew Derek. "Once she's out, you take over. Don't worry about the tech. We'll scrub her code." "Scrub my code." The words hit like a punch. My code was the product's backbone, the reason it worked at all. I scrolled faster, my fingers trembling. Another email, this one to a board member. "Firing her publicly sends a message. No one's irreplaceable." I leaned back, my chest tight. Publicly. He'd planned the boardroom humiliations, savored it. The image of his smirk burned fresh, but now it wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty, calculated and cold. "Clara." I said, my voice shaking. "He's replacing me with Derek." "The guy can't even read a debug log." She nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Richard's been pushing Derek as the new face of tech. He's telling everyone you caused the glitches." I clenched my fists, the laptop screen blurring. Glitches? I'd spent nights fixing glitches Richard ignored because he'd rather spend on ads than servers. And Derek, who'd once asked me how to reset his own password, was his golden boy. The unfairness clawed at me, but it was the next email that broke something inside. Richard to Derek, sent the night before my firing. "She's expendable. Tomorrow we make an example of her. The board will eat it up. Expendable." The word echoed, slicing deeper than unreliable. I'd given them everything, my time, my ideas, my trust, and Richard had laughed about crushing me. My hands shook so hard I had to grip the table. Clara reached out, but I waved her off, too raw to be touched. He planned this, I said, more to myself than her. He wanted me to feel small. Clara's voice was quiet. There's more. Keep reading. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop. Another thread, this one between Richard and a tech consultant I didn't know. Once Derek's in, we clean the system, Richard wrote. Her failsafe won't be an issue. My heart stopped. My failsafe, the secret back door I'd coded, the one I thought only Helen knew about. How did Richard know? Had someone betrayed me even before Clara? The room spun and I pushed the laptop away, my breath shallow. Audrey, you okay? Clara asked, her voice distant. No, I snapped louder than I meant. How am I supposed to be okay? He's stealing my work, my life, and now he knows about my failsafe. Clara flinched. I didn't know he knew. I swear. I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. She'd held back before. How much was she still hiding? I stood pacing her tiny kitchen, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. Richard wasn't just erasing me. He was dismantling everything I'd built, handing it to someone who'd ruin it. The product wasn't just code, it was my legacy, proof I'd made something real. And he was laughing about it. I stopped, my eyes landing on a photo on Clara's fridge, us at a company picnic, smiling like the world made sense. That Audrey trusted too easily, believed in teamwork and fairness. Now I felt like a fool. The anger surged hot and sharp, but beneath it was something heavier, grief for the person I'd been. I turned to Clara, my voice low. I need to talk to Rachel. She's in finance. She has to know something. Clara's eyes widened. Your sister Audrey, be careful. If she's close to the board, she's in Richard's circle. I nodded, the weight of her words settling in. Rachel's text last night. Her silence after I asked her to call, it wasn't just distance. It was guilt. My own sister, part of the machine that crushed me. The thought twisted the knife and I grabbed my notebook, needing its familiar weight. I'll see you later, I said. Heading for the door, my mind already racing toward the confrontation I couldn't avoid. I stepped out of Clara's apartment, the USB drive heavy in my pocket, my notebook clutched tight. The morning sun did nothing to warm the chill in my bones. I was Audrey, 32, and the sting of Richard's emails, his casual cruelty, his plan to erase me pulsed like a fresh bruise. But it was Rachel's silence that cut deeper. My sister, my blood, had to know more than her vague text let on. I hailed a cab, my destination, her sleek downtown condo, my heart pounding with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. The ride was a blur, city streets flashing by as I replayed our childhood. Rachel, 2 years older, always the practical one, guiding me through scraped knees and bad breakups. But these past few years, her ambition had pulled her away. Her suits sharper, her calls rarer. I'd chalked it up to her climbing the corporate ladder, but now doubt gnawed at me. Had she known Richard's plan? Had she chosen her career over me? Her building loomed all glass and steel, a world away from my cluttered apartment. The doorman waved me up, and I rode the elevator. My reflection in the polished doors showing a woman I barely recognized, eyes shadowed, jaw tight. I knocked on Rachel's door, my pulse loud in my ears. She opened it, dressed in a crisp blazer, her dark hair pulled back. Her smile faltered when she saw my face. Audrey, she said, stepping aside. I wasn't expecting you. I walked in the scent of her lavender candle cloying. Her condo was pristine, all white furniture and framed awards. I set my notebook on her counter, its worn cover out of place. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. About Richard. About what happened. She crossed her arms, her eyes flickering. I heard. I'm sorry, Audrey. It's awful. Sorry I stepped closer, my anger flaring. You're in finance, Rachel. You sit in board meetings. Don't tell me you didn't know Richard was planning to fire me. Her face tightened and she looked away toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. It's not that simple. I heard rumors, sure, but I didn't know the details. I'm not in Richard's inner circle. Rumors. My voice rose sharp. You knew enough to text me last night, but not enough to warn me I was humiliated, Rachel. In front of everyone. And you're telling me you had no idea. She turned her eyes flashing. What was I supposed to do? Risk my job? I've got bills, Audrey. Mom's medical costs. You think I can just throw it all away? Her words hit hard, dragging up our mother's frail figure her hospital stays. Rachel had always shouldered that burden managing payments while I focused on work. Guilt twisted in my gut, but it wasn't enough to douse my anger. You could have told me, I said, my voice breaking. You're my sister. I trusted you. She softened, stepping closer. I wanted to. But Richard, he's ruthless. If I'd said anything, I'd be out too. I was trying to protect us both. I shook my head, backing away. Protect us. By letting me walk into that boardroom blind. By letting him call me expendable. The word slipped out raw, and Rachel's eyes widened. Expendable, she whispered. He said that I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, holding it up. It's all here. Emails. He planned it, Rachel. He wanted to make an example of me. And you knew enough to stay quiet. Her face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the sister I used to know, the one who'd braid my hair and share her ice cream. But then she straightened, her voice firm. I didn't know it was that bad. I thought it was just business. You know how it is. Just business. I laughed, bitter, the sound harsh in the quiet room. That's my life, Rachel. My work. You think it's okay to let me burn because it's business? She didn't answer, her silence louder than any words. I paced my hands, shaking the USB drive hot in my palm. I wanted her to fight back, to explain, but she just stood there, her awards glinting behind her like a mockery of my failure. I thought of the fail-safe, my secret weapon, and how Richard somehow knew about it. Had Rachel known too? Had she told him, trading my trust for her promotion? Audrey, she said finally, her voice small. I'm sorry. I should have said something. But I was scared. I stopped, my chest heaving. Scared. The word felt hollow, a flimsy excuse for betrayal. I looked at her, searching for the sister who'd once promised we'd always have each other. But all I saw was someone who'd chosen herself, leaving me to drown. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I grabbed my notebook, my knuckles white. I need to know. I said, my voice low, trembling. Did you tell Richard about my failsafe? Did you give him that too? Her eyes widened, her mouth opening, but no words came. The silence was an answer, and it shattered something inside me. I turned, heading for the door, my heart a knot of rage and grief. Rachel called my name, but I didn't stop. The elevator dinged, and as the doors closed, I leaned against the wall, the USB drive and notebook, my only anchors in a world that felt like it was collapsing around me. The weeks since Rachel's silence had been a blur of rage and planning. I was Audrey, 32, and the USB drive's secrets fueled my every step. Richard's emails, his plan to erase me, and now the sting of my sister's betrayal, they burned, pushing me toward a moment I couldn't avoid. Today was the investor meeting, the one I wasn't invited to, where Richard would parade my work as his own. I stood outside the company's glass tower, my heart hammering, dressed in a borrowed maintenance uniform. The badge clipped to my chest read, Janice a lie to get me inside. I slipped through the service entrance, the hum of the building's AC masking my shaky breaths. My phone was in one pocket, the notebook in another, its pages holding the key to my plan. I'd spent nights refining the failsafe, ensuring it would lock the system at my command. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice, a way to show the world who Richard really was. But as I moved through the back halls, my boots silent on the tile, doubt clawed at me. What if I got caught? What if this destroyed me too? The boardroom was on the 10th floor, a place I'd once entered with pride. Now I was an intruder, my pulse loud in my ears as I rode the service elevator. The uniform's stiff collar chafed, but it hid my face from security cameras. I checked my phone 10 minutes until Richard's presentation. My thumb hovered over the app I'd coded, the one that would trigger the failsafe. One tap, and the product would crash, exposing Richard's lies. But my hand shook, Helen's voice echoing in my mind. Truth locks the system. Would she approve of this? The elevator dinged and I stepped into a quiet corridor. Voices leaked from the boardroom, Richard's smooth tone cutting through. I crept closer, peering through a glass panel. He stood at the front slides, glowing behind him, my product's interface on display. Investors in sharp suits nodded impressed. Derek sat to his right, smirking, his tie too bright for the room. My stomach twisted. That was my work, my years of sweat, and they were stealing it, rewriting my name out of the story. I crouched, pulling out my phone, my fingers slick with sweat. The app was simple, a single button labeled Execute. I'd programmed the failsafe to lock every critical function, displaying an error only I could fix, system locked. Contact lead developer. It was my last card, a desperate play to force Richard to face his lies. But as I stared at the screen, Rachel's face flashed in my mind. Her guilt, her silence. Had she told Richard about the failsafe? Was I walking into a trap? Footsteps echoed behind me and I froze, shoving the phone in my pocket. A security guard rounded the corner, his radio crackling. "Hey you," he called, his voice sharp. "What are you doing here?" My mouth went dry, but I stood adjusting my cap to hide my eyes. "Just checking the vents," I said, my voice low, praying the uniform held up. "Got a work order." He squinted, stepping closer. "Let me see your badge." I held it up, my hand steady despite the panic screaming inside. He studied it, then nodded. "Hurry up. Big meeting's on." I forced a smile, waiting until he turned away before exhaling. My heart pounded so hard I thought it had burst. I checked the time, 5 minutes left. The boardroom's glass door was ajar. Richard's voice, louder now, boasting about his tech breakthroughs. Every word was a theft, a lie built on my work. I slid along the wall, close enough to see the demo screen, the product running flawlessly. My product. My legacy. I pulled out my phone again, my thumb trembling over the button. This was it, the point of no return. I thought of Clara's fear, Rachel's betrayal, Richard's smirk as he called me expendable. The anger surged, drowning my doubt. I tapped the screen, and a small loading bar appeared, counting down. 10 seconds. 9. My breath hitched, my eyes locked on the demo screen inside. Richard clicked to the next slide, oblivious, his voice booming about future profits. 7 seconds. 6. The investors leaned forward, captivated. Derek adjusted his tie, smug. I gripped my notebook, Helen's words anchoring me. This wasn't just for me, it was for every user who trusted the product, every coder who'd ever been erased. 4 seconds. 3. My chest tightened, a mix of fear and power rushing through me. What had I done? The screen flickered, just a glitch at first, and Richard paused, his smile faltering. 1 second. 0. The demo screen froze, then went black. A single line appeared in bold white text, system locked. Contact lead developer. Gasps filled the room, chairs scraping as investors turned to Richard. His face paled, his hands fumbling with the remote. Derek stood, his voice high. "What's happening?" The room erupted in murmurs, and I stepped back. My heart racing, the weight of what I'd unleashed crashing over me like a wave. The boardroom dissolved into chaos. Voices overlapping as investors demanded answers. I was Audrey, 32, pressed against the corridor wall, my pulse a deafening roar, the error message, system locked. Contact lead developer glowed on the screen, my truth laid bare. Richard's face twisted, his composure gone, as he barked at Derek to fix it. Derek fumbled with a laptop, his fingers clumsy, his panic visible even from here. My notebook dug into my hip, a reminder of the line I'd crossed. I'd done this. Me. Inside, an investor stood, his voice sharp. "Richard, you said this was stable. What's going on?" Others nodded, their trust crumbling. Richard raised his hands, his laugh forced. "Just a glitch. We'll have it up in minutes." But his eyes darted to the door, searching, and I shrank back, my breath shallow. Did he know I was here? Had Rachel tipped him off? The thought of her betrayal, her silence in her pristine condo, clawed at me anew. Derek's voice cracked. "It's not responding." The screen flickered, the error message pulsing like a heartbeat. I'd coded it to lock every critical function a puzzle only I could solve. But as I watched the room unravel, a wave of dread hit. This wasn't just Richard's humiliation, it was my work, my product now a public failure. Investors whispered their faces hard. One pulled out a phone, likely calling their lawyers. My stomach churned. Had I gone too far? Richard rounded on his team, his voice rising. Someone get it up here now. But the room's energy had shifted, suspicion replacing awe. A woman in a navy suit stood, her tone icy. You fired your lead developer last week, didn't you, publicly? Was this her work? My heart stopped. She knew. The room turned to Richard, waiting. He froze, then forced a smile. She was unreliable. This isn't her fault. It's a server issue. Unreliable. The words straight from his emails hit like a blade. I gripped my phone, the app still open, its countdown long finished. I'd wanted to expose him, but hearing my name dragged through his lies in front of strangers was a fresh wound. My work wasn't just locked, it was being tarnished. My legacy twisted into his excuse. The woman pressed, then why does the error say, contact lead developer? Sounds like she's the only one who can fix this. Murmurs grew louder, heads nodding. Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the room. She's gone, he snapped. We don't need her. But his voice shook and Derek's wide-eyed stare betrayed their panic. I wanted to scream, to burst in and tell them everything, how I'd built every line, how Richard had stolen my credit, how he'd planned my ruin. But my feet stayed rooted, fear and fury locking me in place. A new voice cut through, familiar and sharp. Nathan, my colleague, standing near the back. Audrey wasn't unreliable. He said, his tone firm. She was the only one keeping this product alive. My breath caught, gratitude and terror colliding. Nathan was risking his job, but his words were a lifeline, proof I wasn't invisible. Richard whirled on him, his face red. Sit down, Nathan. This isn't your place. Nathan hesitated, his eyes meeting Richard's glare, then dropped back into his seat. Silenced. The room's tension spiked, investors exchanging looks. I pressed a hand to my mouth, stifling a sob. Nathan had tried, but it wasn't enough. Richard was still in control, spinning his narrative, and I was still the ghost he'd made me. The error message blinked, unyielding. But it wasn't victory, it was exposure, raw and unrelenting, leaving me as vulnerable as him. An investor slammed a fist on the table. Fix this, Richard, or we pull funding, now. The words echoed final, and Richard's mask slipped, his hands trembling as he nodded. Derek typed frantically, achieving nothing. The room's chaos mirrored my own anger, grief, and a sickening realization that I'd bared my soul to ruin him, only to find myself breaking too. I slid down the wall, my knees weak, the notebook slipping from my hands. Everything I'd fought for was crumbling, and I was too shattered to move. I stumbled out of the company tower, the chaos of the boardroom echoing in my ears. I was Audrey, 32, my notebook clutched tight, the USB drive a heavy weight in my pocket. The error message I'd unleashed, system locked. Contact lead developer had torn Richard's facade apart, but it left me raw, my heart pounding with equal parts triumph and dread. Nathan's defense, the investor's anger, Rachel's betrayal, they swirled in my mind as I walked the city's noise, a dull roar. I couldn't stay still. I needed to act, to turn this moment into something more than pain. I found myself at a co-working space a few blocks away, a place I'd used during late-night coding sessions. The open room buzzed with freelancers, their laptops glowing, but I claimed a quiet corner, my hands still shaking as I set down my notebook. The failsafe had done its job, exposing Richard's lies, but it wasn't enough. He'd scrambled to cover his tracks, blame someone else. I had to move faster, smarter. I opened my laptop. The USB drive's contents staring back at me. Richard's emails, his plan to replace me with Derek, his mockery of my work. Proof, but only if I used it right. My first thought was the press. If the world knew Richard's truth, he couldn't hide. I searched for Samantha, a tech journalist I'd met at a conference last year. Her articles were sharp, unafraid to call out corporate greed. I found her email, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Sending her the emails was a risk once they were out. I couldn't control the fallout. Legal threats, public scrutiny, maybe worse. But staying silent meant letting Richard win, letting him erase me. I started typing my voice steady in my head, despite the fear. Samantha, I wrote, I'm Audrey, former lead developer at the company. I was fired last week publicly to cover up Richard's mismanagement. I have emails proving he scapegoated me to hide his financial failures. Today I locked the product's system to prove a point. I'm ready to talk. I attached the files, my heart racing. This wasn't just about me, it was about every user who trusted the product, every coder who'd been pushed out. I hit send, the sound of the click louder than the room's hum. I leaned back, exhaling, but my mind didn't rest. The failsafe was my leverage, but Richard knew about it. If he traced it to me, he'd come for me hard. I needed a backup, something he couldn't touch. I logged into a private server I'd set up years ago, one Helen had taught me to keep off the company's radar. My fingers flew uploading a copy of the failsafe's code, its triggers, and a detailed log of my contributions to the product. If Richard tried to bury me, this would be my shield. My phone buzzed, pulling me back. A text from Clara, boardrooms, a mess. Richard's blaming a T. Be careful. I stared at the words, gratitude mixing with unease. Clara had risked a lot getting me those emails, but her hesitation at the start still lingered a crack in our trust. I texted back, thanks, I'm handling it. Short because trust felt fragile now, even with her. I needed allies, but I also needed to stand alone. I thought of Margaret, the company's CTO. She'd always been fair, praising my work in private meetings, but she hadn't been in the boardroom when Richard fired me. Did she know the truth? I pulled up her contact, my thumb hesitating. Calling her was a gamble. If she sided with Richard, I'd lose everything. But if she didn't, she could change the game. I dialed, my voice steady as it rang. Audrey. Margaret's tone was surprised but warm. I heard what happened. Are you okay? I swallowed, choosing my words. Not really. Richard fired me to cover his mistakes. I locked the system today to prove it. I have proof, emails, plans. I can fix the product, but only if he's out. Silence stretched and my stomach nodded. Then she spoke, cautious. That's a serious claim. Can you back it up? I can, I said, gripping the notebook. But I need to know you're with me. Reinstate me, remove Richard, and I'll unlock the system. If not, it stays down. Another pause, longer this time. Send me what you have, she said finally. I'll review it. But Audrey, this better be airtight. I nodded, though she couldn't see. It is. Check your email in 10. I hung up, my breath shaky, but my resolve hardening. I forwarded her the emails, my fingers steady now. This was my fight, my chance to reclaim what was mine. The co-working space felt brighter, the chatter around me fading as I focused. I wasn't the Audrey who'd walked into that boardroom a week ago trusting and naive. I was someone new, someone who'd learned to wield her own power. The co-working space hummed around me, but I was locked in my laptop screen, glowing with the email I'd just sent to Margaret. I was Audrey, 32, and the weight of my choices, locking the product, exposing Richard's lies, pressed against my chest. Sending Samantha the emails and negotiating with Margaret were bold moves, but they felt incomplete, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't fully solved. My notebook lay open, its pages a map of my past, but it was Rachel's betrayal that gnawed at me now. If I was going to fight, I needed her truth, no matter how much it hurt. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over Rachel's name. Our last meeting, her refusal to testify, had left a wound that hadn't stopped bleeding. But she was in finance, close to the board. If anyone could confirm Richard's financial cover-ups, it was her. I needed her to step up, not for me, but for what was right. I typed a text, short and direct. Meet me at the park by your place. 1 hour. No excuses. I hit send, my heart pounding, then stood needing air. The co-working space's glass doors swung shut behind me as I stepped onto the street. The midday sun was harsh, glinting off car windows, but it didn't touch the cold knot in my stomach. I walked toward the park, my notebook tucked under my arm, its familiar weight grounding me. I'd spent years hiding my strength, playing nice to fit in, but that Audrey was gone. The woman who'd locked the system in front of investors was someone else. Someone who'd learned to fight, even if it scared her. The park was quiet, its benches empty save for a few joggers in the distance. I sat near a fountain, the soft splash of water steadying my nerves. My phone buzzed Rachel's reply. "I'll be there." No apology, no warmth, just agreement. I exhaled, unsure if I was relieved or dreading what came next. I opened my notebook, flipping to a blank page, and started jotting notes for my next move. If Margaret agreed to my terms, I'd need a plan to unlock the system without giving Richard a way back in. If she didn't, I'd need Samantha's article to hit hard, exposing everything. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path, and I looked up. Rachel approached, her blazer swapped for a casual jacket, her face drawn. She sat across from me, her hands clasped tight. "You wanted to talk," she said, her voice flat, like she was bracing for a fight. I met her eyes, my own steady despite the ache in my chest. "I need the truth, Rachel. About Richard's financial games. You're in the boardroom. You know what he's hiding." Her jaw tightened, and she looked away toward the fountain. "You don't get it, Audrey. If I talk, I'm done. My career, Mom's care gone." I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "And if you don't, he wins. He's stealing my work, Rachel, and he's using you to do it. You knew about the firing. You knew about his budget cuts. What else are you hiding?" Her eyes flashed, anger breaking through. "I'm not hiding anything. I told you I didn't know the full plan. I'm trying to keep us afloat, not tear you down. Us." I stood, my voice rising despite myself. "You let me burn, Rachel. You chose your job over me. Now I'm asking you to make it right. Testify. Tell the board about his financial cover-ups. Help me stop him." She stood too, her face pale. "You think it's that easy? Richard's got the board in his pocket. If I speak, they'll bury me too." I stepped closer, my notebook in one hand, the USB drive in the other. "Then we bury him first. I've got emails proof he planned this. Samantha's running a story. Margaret's listening. But I need you, Rachel. Not for me, for the truth." She stared at me, her eyes searching mine, and for a moment I saw the sister who'd once fought for me. Then she shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't. Not yet." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I'd expected resistance, but not this, a refusal to even try. I swallowed the hurt, channeling it into something harder. "Fine," I said, my voice calm but cold. "But I'm not stopping. With or without you, I'm taking him down." Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came. I turned, walking away, my steps deliberate. The park's calm felt mocking the fountain's splash, too gentle for the storm inside me. I slipped the USB drive back into my pocket, my fingers brushing the notebook's edge. Rachel's choice was hers, but mine was clear. I'd fight not just for my job, but for every piece of myself I'd let others diminish. Back at the co-working space, I checked my email. A reply from Samantha. "This is explosive. Can we meet tomorrow?" My pulse quickened, a spark of hope igniting. Then another email from Margaret. "I've seen the files. Let's talk." My office, 8 a.m. I closed my laptop, my breath steady now. The pieces were moving, and I was no longer the woman who'd stood frozen in that boardroom. I sat back, my eyes falling on the notebook's open page where I'd written one word in bold truth. I traced it, my fingers steady, and in the quiet of that moment, I felt the strength I'd been searching for all along. I sat in a coffee shop across from the company's tower, the steam from my untouched latte curling into the air. I was Audrey, 32, and the past 48 hours had shifted the ground beneath me. Samantha's article had gone live this morning, its headline, "Brutal CEO's Lies Exposed, Fired Developer Locks, Product Reveals Mismanagement." My inbox was flooded with notifications, colleagues, strangers, even a few investors reaching out. Margaret's agreement to meet, my confrontation with Rachel, the emails I'd sent, they'd sparked a fire, and now I watched it burn, my notebook resting on the table, its pages dog-eared but unopened. The coffee shop's windows reflected the morning rush, but my eyes were fixed on my phone, scrolling through the article. Samantha had woven my evidence into a damning narrative: Richard's overspending his plan to replace me with Derek, his emails mocking my work. She'd included my side, calling me the backbone of the product betrayed by greed. Reading it felt surreal, like watching someone else's life. I'd wanted the truth out, but seeing it in print shared across thousands of screens made my chest tighten. This was real, and there was no going back. My phone buzzed a message from Nathan. Board's in emergency session. Richard's out. Derek sidelined. You did this? I stared at the words, my breath catching. Richard gone. The man who'd called me expendable, who'd orchestrated my public humiliation, had lost his throne. A quiet thrill ran through me, but it was tempered by unease. I'd won a battle, but the war wasn't over. The product was still locked, and the board's next move was anyone's guess. I typed back, thanks for the update. Keep me posted. Nathan's loyalty, his voice in the boardroom, was a small light in the dark, but I couldn't lean on it too hard. I sipped my latte, the bitterness sharp on my tongue. The coffee shop's chatter faded as I thought of Rachel. Our park meeting yesterday, her refusal to testify had left a hollow space between us. I'd walked away, choosing my fight over her fear, but the cost lingered. She was my sister, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd cried with me when our dad left. Now she was a stranger, her silence a wall I couldn't climb. I checked my phone. No messages from her. The absence stung, but I pushed it down, focusing on what came next. Margaret had emailed an hour ago confirming our meeting tomorrow. The board's reviewing your terms, she'd written. Be ready to unlock the system if we agree. Her tone was professional, but I sensed an undercurrent of respect, something I hadn't felt from her before. I'd demanded reinstatement and Richard's removal, and now with him out, half my battle was won. But reinstatement wasn't guaranteed, and unlocking the system meant trusting the board not to bury me again. I opened my notebook, skimming the failsafe's code, its logic a comfort. I'd built a backdoor to protect it, a secondary lock only I could access. If they betrayed me, I'd be ready. A shadow fell across my table and I looked up. Clara stood there, her HR badge clipped to her coat, her face drawn. Audrey, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I saw the article. Everyone's talking about it. I nodded, unsure what to say. Clara had risked her job getting me those emails, but her hesitation at the start still lingered, a crack in our trust. What's the mood at the office? I asked, keeping my voice even. She leaned forward, her voice low. Chaos. Richard's resignation was announced an hour ago. Derek's been pulled from all projects, he's furious, blaming you. The board's scrambling to save face with investors. I absorbed her words, my fingers tracing the notebook's edge. Derek's anger was no surprise, but hearing it out loud made it real. I pictured him in the boardroom, his smug tie and panicked typing, and felt a flicker of satisfaction. But it faded fast. What about you? I asked. You okay? Clara's eyes dropped to the table. I'm under review. Someone saw me with Nathan before he gave you the emails. They're calling it a breach. She paused, her voice softer. I don't regret it, Audrey. You deserve the truth. Her words hit hard, a mix of gratitude and guilt. Clara had crossed a line for me, and now she was paying for it. I reached out, touching her hand briefly. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. I didn't want this to touch you. She shook her head, offering a small smile. It's worth it. You shook them up. People are talking about you, not Richard. She stood, adjusting her coat. I've got to get back. Be careful, okay? I nodded, watching her leave the coffee shop's door swinging shut behind her. Her sacrifice. Nathan's risk, they were ripples from my actions, proof I wasn't alone. But the weight of it settled heavy, a reminder that my fight hurt others too. I looked at my phone, the article still open, its comments piling up. Some called me a hero, others a saboteur. The truth was somewhere in between, and I was still figuring out where I stood. The latte had gone cold, and as I sat there, the victory of Richard's fall felt like a stone in my chest, solid, but unyielding, with no room for relief. The coffee shop's hum faded as I left my steps slow on the bustling sidewalk. I was Audrey, 32, and the aftershocks of my actions rippled through me. Richard's resignation, Clara's review, the article's wildfire spread, they were victories, but they carried a weight I hadn't expected. My notebook stayed in my bag untouched as I headed toward the company's headquarters. Margaret's meeting was tomorrow, but I needed to see Rachel now to know where she stood after everything. The city's pulse felt distant, my focus narrowing to the ache of her silence. Rachel's office was on the 5th floor, a glass-walled space I'd rarely visited. The elevator ride was quiet, the hum of cables amplifying my uneven breaths. I'd demanded her testimony in the park, and she'd refused, but with Richard gone, maybe she'd reconsider. Or maybe I was chasing a bond that no longer existed. The doors opened, and I stepped into the finance department, its open layout buzzing with hushed voices. Heads turned, eyes lingering, a mix of curiosity and unease. The article had made me a name, but not all saw me as a hero. Rachel was at her desk, her back to me, typing furiously. I approached, my throat tight, and cleared it softly. She turned, her face a mask of surprise. Then something else. Guilt maybe, or fear. "Audrey," she said, her voice low, glancing at her colleagues. "What are you doing here?" I stood firm, my bag strap digging into my shoulder. "We need to talk. About the board. About what you know." Her eyes flicked to the glass walls where coworkers pretended not to watch. She stood leading me to a small conference room, its blinds half drawn. The door clicked shut, and she faced me, arms crossed. "You got what you wanted, didn't you? Richard's out. Why are you here?" Her tone stung sharp and defensive. I set my bag down, my voice steady but cold. "I wanted the truth, Rachel. You could have helped, but you chose silence. Now I'm asking again, will you tell the board about his financial cover-ups?" She looked away, her fingers twisting a ring on her hand. "I'm under review too, Audrey. Because of you. The board's digging into everyone close to Richard. If I talk, I'm finished." I stepped closer, my voice softer but unyielding. "And if you don't, you're part of his lie. You saw his budgets, Rachel. You knew he was bleeding the company dry. You owe me this." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the sister I'd known, fierce, protective. But it vanished, replaced by a hardness I didn't recognize. "Owe you," she said, her voice rising. "I've been carrying Mom's bills, keeping this family together while you played coder in your bubble. Don't lecture me about owing." Her words cut deep, dragging up years of unspoken resentment. I'd focused on my career, trusting Rachel to handle our mother's care, but I'd never seen it as a burden she carried alone. My hands clenched, the urge to shout back rising, but I swallowed it. "I'm not your enemy," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I need you to do what's right. For once." She turned to the window, her reflection pale in the glass. "I need time," she said finally, her voice flat. "I can't promise anything. Time." The word felt like a door slamming shut. I wanted to grab her, shake her, make her see the sister she'd left behind. But I didn't. I picked up my bag, my movements slow, deliberate. "I'm meeting Margaret tomorrow," I said. "If you change your mind, you know where to find me." I walked out, the conference room's silence heavy behind me. The finance floor's eyes followed me, whispers trailing in my wake. I rode the elevator, down, my reflection in its doors showing a woman carved by choices, harder, sharper, but still standing. Rachel's refusal wasn't just a rejection. It was a mirror showing me how far we'd drifted. I stepped onto the street, the city's noise rushing back, and stopped, my breath visible in the cool air. The fight had cost me more than I'd realized, and as I stood there, the weight of it settled like dust, quiet and suffocating, with no end in sight. The morning sun filtered through my apartment's blinds, casting soft stripes across the hardwood floor. I was Audrey, 32, and the past few months had reshaped me like a river smoothing stone. My reinstatement as lead developer, Richard's downfall, Rachel's hesitant steps toward truth. They were victories, but they'd left scars. I stood at my kitchen counter, a mug of tea warming my hands, the chaos of files and papers now neatly stacked. The silence felt new, not heavy, but like a space to breathe, to think. I'd spent the night unpacking boxes I hadn't touched since the firing. Old sketchbooks, a chipped mug from my first job, a scarf Helen had knitted me years ago. They were pieces of a life I'd almost forgotten. I draped the scarf over my shoulders, its wool soft against my skin, and sat on the couch, my notebook unopened for once. Work was steady now, the product relaunched to quiet praise, but I wasn't the same coder who'd built it. That woman had trusted too easily, believed effort alone could shield her. I was different now, steadier, my edges honed by betrayal. My phone buzzed, a reminder of a meeting later, but I ignored it. Instead, I pulled out a small wooden box from the shelf, one I hadn't opened since Helen's funeral. Inside was a stack of her handwritten notes folded tight, each one a lesson from our late-night talks. I unfolded the top one, her slanted script. Clear strength isn't loud, Audrey. It's choosing to keep going. I smiled, my chest loosening. Helen had seen me not just as a coder and as someone who could endure. I wanted to honor that, not just for her, but for myself. I stood, slipping the note into my pocket, and grabbed my coat. The cemetery where Helen rested was a short drive, a place I hadn't visited in months. The road wound through quiet suburbs, the radio off, my thoughts loud enough. I parked near the gate, the air crisp with early fall leaves skittering across the path. Helen's grave was under a maple, its stone simple, her name etched deep. I knelt, brushing dirt from the base, and set the note beside it, its paper bright against the gray. Helen, I said softly, my voice steady. I made it through. You'd be proud, I think. The words felt right, not a goodbye, but a promise kept. I sat back, the grass cool beneath me, and let the quiet settle. The fight with Richard, the rift with Rachel, they'd torn me open, but they'd also shown me what I could do. I wasn't just the woman who'd locked the system. I was the one who'd rebuilt it, who'd faced her sister's silence, and still chosen to stand. A breeze stirred, lifting the note slightly, and I thought of the scholarship I'd started in Helen's name. The paperwork had cleared yesterday, funded by my relaunch bonus, a quiet act to lift others as she'd lifted me. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, a way to plant something good in the wreckage. I stood, my scarf catching the wind, and took a slow breath. The cemetery was still, the world beyond it distant, and for the first time in months I felt like I could carry the weight of my choices without breaking. I drove back from the cemetery, the scarf still around my shoulders, its faint scent of wool grounding me. I was Audrey, 32, and the quiet of that moment with Helen's grave lingered like a soft hand on my back. My apartment felt different when I returned, not just tidier, but lighter, as if I'd let go of something heavy. I set my keys down and noticed a text from Rachel. Can we talk tonight? My place. 7. My thumb paused over the screen, a flicker of old hurt rising, but I typed back, I'll be there. No questions, no demands, just agreement. The afternoon passed in small tasks, watering a neglected plant, sorting emails, scheduling a call about the scholarship. Each felt like a stitch mending the frayed edges of my life. By evening, I was at Rachel's condo, the city's lights glinting through her windows. She opened the door, her face softer than I'd seen in weeks, and gestured to the couch. A pizza box sat on her coffee table, 2 plates beside it, a gesture so familiar it ached. We sat, the silence between us, not tense, but careful, like stepping onto new ice. I read the article Rachel said, finally, her voice low, and I heard about the relaunch. You didn't just fight Audrey, you won. I looked at her, searching for the resentment I'd felt in her office, but it wasn't there. Her eyes were clear, tired, but open. I didn't win everything, I said, my voice quiet. Not us. She nodded, picking at her pizza crust. I messed up. I thought keeping quiet would protect me, protect Mom. But it hurt you, and I can't undo that. She paused, her fingers still. I told the board about Richard's budgets last week. Not much, but enough to back you up. I should have done it sooner. Her words settled, not a fix, but a start. I took a bite of pizza, the taste warm and simple, and let the moment sit. We weren't the sisters we'd been braiding hair and sharing secrets, but we weren't strangers either. Thank you, I said, meaning it, for trying. We ate in quiet, the hum of her fridge filling the gaps. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was enough for now, a step towards something new. Later I walked home, the night air cool against my face, my steps unhurried. At my desk, I opened my laptop and saw an email from Tessa, the new developer I'd been mentoring. "Thanks for the feedback," she wrote. "I'm learning so much." I smiled, my fingers brushing the screen. Tessa's questions, her quiet drive, reminded me of my own start, but I wasn't passing on just code, I was sharing what Helen had given me: belief. I closed the laptop and stood at my window, the city sprawling below, its lights steady. The fight with Richard, the rift with Rachel, the weight of proving myself, they'd carved me into someone new, someone who could stand still and not break. I wrapped Helen's scarf tighter, its warmth a quiet promise, and let my breath slow. The world kept moving, but for this moment I was enough, and that was all I needed. I walked through the park near my office, the early autumn leaves crunching under my boots. I was Audrey, 32, and the world felt quieter now, like it had exhaled after months of holding its breath. My work bag hung light on my shoulder, no longer stuffed with frantic notes or proof of my worth. The company was steady, the product humming along, and my desk held a new nameplate: lead developer earned again. But it wasn't the title that grounded me, it was the way I carried myself now, steady, unafraid. Mornings had a new rhythm. I'd started brewing coffee at home, the slow drip of the machine a small ritual. Today I held a travel mug, its warmth seeping into my palms as I sat on a bench watching joggers pass. The park was alive, kids laughing near a playground, dogs chasing frisbees. I used to rush through places like this, my mind on deadlines, but now I lingered, letting the ordinary soak in. It was a choice, one I'd learned through fire. My phone stayed quiet, no urgent emails or panicked texts. Tessa's latest project update sat unread, a sign she was finding her footing. I'd spent weeks guiding her, not just through code, but through confidence, the way Helen once did for me. It wasn't grand gestures, just small corrections, a nod when she nailed a solution. I saw myself in her hesitations, but also in her quiet resolve, and it made me feel like I was building something beyond software. Rachel and I were talking again, not often, but enough. Last week she'd sent a photo of Mom smiling at a physical therapy session, her first in months. No words, just the image, but it was her way of reaching out. I'd replied with a simple, "Looks good," and we left it there. No pressure, no rush. We were stitching ourselves back together, one thread at a time, and I was learning to be okay with the slowness of it. I sipped my coffee, the bitter warmth grounding me. The park's trees were turning gold, their branches swaying gently. I thought of the woman I'd been a year ago, the one who'd stood in that boardroom, her heart pounding under Richard's smirk. She'd trusted too much, given too freely, and it had cost her. But she'd also fought not with fists, but with truth, and that fight had carved a new shape in me, one that could bend without breaking. A kid's laugh broke my thoughts, high and clear, and I smiled, setting my mug down. I reached into my bag, pulling out a new notebook, its pages crisp and unmarked. The old one, worn from years of code and pain, was tucked away at home, a relic of battles won. This one was for ideas, new projects, not just for work, but for me. A community coding workshop maybe, or a blog about surviving corporate games. Small seeds, but mine to plant. I stood stretching, the park's air cool against my face. The sun was higher now, warming the bench where I'd sat. I didn't need to run anymore, didn't need to prove anything to anyone but myself. The scars were there, faint but real, but they didn't define me. I walked on my steps, light the notebook in my hand, a quiet promise of what came next. The park's path curved toward a pond, its surface catching the late afternoon light. I was Audrey, 32, my new notebook tucked under my arm, its blank pages a canvas for whatever came next. The fight with Richard, the rift with Rachel, the weight of proving myself, they'd faded into a quieter place, not gone, but softened like stones smoothed by a stream. I stopped by the water, watching ripples spread from a duck's gentle glide. Life had a way of moving forward even when you felt stuck. I thought of the choices I'd made, not just locking the system or exposing Richard, but the smaller ones since. Sitting with Tessa over coffee, listening to her fears about failing and sharing mine. Writing a letter to Mom, not about money or burdens, but about memories we'd forgotten to share. Even the way I walked, now slower, noticing the way leaves caught the wind. These weren't victories you shouted about. They were the kind you lived day by day until they became who you were. The hardest lesson wasn't about Richard or the company, it was about me. I'd spent years tying my worth to my work, to what others saw in me. When that was stripped away, I'd faced a truth. I had to choose myself, not out of anger, but out of quiet faith. It wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and still choosing to stand. I looked at the pond, its ripples fading, and felt a calm settle, not perfect, but real. I'd learned to forgive, not Richard, not fully, but the part of me that had trusted too blindly, that had feared I wasn't enough. I started walking again, my boots soft on the path. A woman passed, her dog tugging at its leash, and she smiled at me, brief but warm. I nodded back, realizing I'd missed those small connections, the ones that didn't ask for anything. I'd spent so long fighting to be seen, I'd forgotten how to just be. Now I was learning how to sit with silence, how to let go of old hurts, how to build without fear of losing it all again. The notebook felt light in my hands, its possibilities open. I jotted down a plan for a coding workshop, a way to teach others what Helen taught me, that your work is yours, but your heart doesn't belong to any company. I'd start small, maybe a few students, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, I'd learned, were where strength lived, not in loud triumphs, but in the quiet choice to keep going. I reached the park's edge, the city's hum returning softer now. I paused, tucking a stray hair behind my ear, and looked back at the pond. It was still reflecting the sky's fading gold. I wasn't the woman who'd stood in that boardroom, nor the one who'd begged Rachel for truth. I was just Audrey, and that was enough. What moment made you choose yourself again? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, maybe give it a like, subscribe for more, or pass it on to someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to healing, one step at a time.